They laughed when she walked in. The rejected Omega, wearing a borrowed dress, sitting in the back row while her ex-mate married her sister. No one noticed her trembling hands until the air shifted, thick with power. The blind Alpha King had arrived. And for some reason, his steps stopped right in front of her. "My wolf knows you," he whispered. And just like that, every head turned. Chapter 1. The Wedding Seat. They laughed when she walked in. The sound, a bright tinkle of crystal and condescension, followed Elsinore to the very last row. She found her seat, a single forgotten chair against the back wall, near the drafty entrance of the Silver Moon Pack's great hall. It was a mercy, she supposed. It was also an insult. She sat, her hands trembling in the lap of her borrowed dress. It was a pale lavender, a color that washed out her dark hair and gray eyes, and it was a size too large in the shoulders. It hung on her, a constant reminder that she was an afterthought, a ghost at her own funeral. Because that's what this was. At the front of the hall, under a cascade of white roses and shimmering moon vines, her sister Callista was radiant. Her white gown, the one Elsinore had sketched in her own journal for years, fit Callista's perfect buxom figure flawlessly. Beside her, tall and proud in his alpha black leathers, stood Darian. Her Darian? No, never her Darian. He was her ex-mate, the man who had publicly, brutally rejected her 3 moons ago, severing the fragile, nascent bond that had shimmered between them since they were pups. "I, Darian, Alpha of the Silver Moon Pack," he had declared in the town square, his voice booming with a power she'd once admired. "Reject Elsinore of the Silver Creek line. Her wolf is stunted, her spirit weak. She is an Omega in truth, not fit to be my Luna." The pain hadn't been a clean cut. It was a tearing, a spiritual amputation that had left her wolf, a creature she had always felt as a quiet as silver presence, utterly silent. The rejection had hollowed her out, leaving an echoing void where her strength used to be. And now, he was marrying her sister. The whispers from the row in front of her were sharp, meant to be heard. "Can you believe she actually came?" A woman named Vespera hissed, her voice dripping with faux pity. "Shameless," another, Tatiana, agreed. "To sit here and watch? It's pathetic." Poor thing. First rejected, now replaced by her own blood. Darian was right to cast her off. Weakness taints the whole line. Elsinore flinched, drawing her arms tighter around her waist. She focused on the scent in the hall, cloying incense and the sharp, sweet smell of the white roses, Callista's favorite. They made Elsinore's stomach turn. She hated white roses. The pack's elder, Roderick, began the rites. "We gather under the eye of the moon to join 2 souls, 2 wolves, 2 futures." Elsinore closed her eyes. She wouldn't cry. She had no tears left. She had spent them all in the first month, howling into her pillow until her throat was raw. Now, she was just empty, a vessel for shame. "Do you, Callista, accept Darian as your alpha, your mate, your life?" "I do," Callista's voice was a song. "And do you, Darian, accept Callista as your Luna, your mate, your heart?" "I do." His voice was firm. Elsinore's trembling hands reached for the goblet of watered-down wine on the floor beside her. Her fingers spasmed. The cup tipped, spilling a dark purple stain over the lavender silk of her skirt. A quiet, choked sound escaped her. The final humiliation. As she fumbled with a napkin, trying to scrub at the stain, the ceremony reached its peak. The sharing of blood, the ceremonial bite, a collective happy sigh rose from the crowd. Elsinore didn't look up. She couldn't. She just stared at the spreading stain, which felt like a map of her own brokenness. It was over. He was truly gone. She was truly, irrevocably alone. A sudden, deep boom echoed through the hall as the massive oak doors were thrown open. A gust of cold, pine-scented wind ripped through the room, extinguishing half the candles and sending the white rose petals scattering. The music stopped. The laughter died. A palpable physical pressure descended on the hall. It was a weight, an aura so dense and ancient it forced the air from Elsinore's lungs. Every wolf in the room, from the lowest Omega to Alpha Darian himself, stiffened. "What is this?" Darian snarled, stepping in front of Callista. A guard from the back row scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide with terror. "Alpha," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Forgive me. We were not warned. The Alpha King is coming." Chapter 2. The Arrival. The silence that fell over the great hall was absolute. It was not a reverent hush. It was a pressurized, terrified vacuum. Even the whispers died, stillborn in the throats of the gossips. Elsinore's head snapped up, her own misery momentarily forgotten, replaced by a cold spike of primal fear. The Alpha King, King Theron of the Obsidian Court. He was a legend, a myth made of shadow and power. No one from a minor pack like Silvermoon had ever seen him. He was the alpha of alphas, ruling the entire northern region with an iron hand. They said his pack lands were a fortress of volcanic glass and ancient pines, a place where the moon's light was said to be brighter and colder than anywhere on Earth. They also said he was blind. A slow, heavy click, 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 echoed from the entrance. It was the sound of claws, too large to be human, on the marble floor. He entered, and the world tilted. He was led not by a guard, but by a wolf. It was a monstrous creature, a dire wolf from the old stories, its fur the color of a storm cloud and its shoulders standing as high as a man's chest. It moved with a liquid, predatory grace, and its yellow eyes scanned the room with terrifying intelligence. The king himself was a contradiction. He was immense, broader in the shoulder and taller by a head than even Darian. He wore no crown, only simple dark leathers that seemed to drink the light in the room. His black hair was long, tied back in a severe knot. But it was his face that held every gaze. It was a face carved from granite, handsome but brutal. And his eyes? They were closed, but the skin over them was puckered and silvered with two terrible vertical scars. A curse, the stories whispered. A battle, others said. A betrayal, the darkest rumors claimed. He was blind, utterly, permanently blind. Yet he moved with a dreadful, uncanny confidence, his hand resting lightly on the massive wolf's neck. His aura was not just power, it was a crushing weight of ancient sorrow, of rage contained, of a loneliness so profound it felt like the winter night. Every guest, as one, sank to their knees. It was not a practiced ceremony, it was an instinct. The pack's collective wolves recognized their true master. Even Alpha Darian, his face pale and tight, bent his head in a shallow, grudging bow. Callista looked furious, her perfect wedding interrupted. King Theron did not pause. He did not look toward the altar. His scarred face was tilted as if he were listening to the room, tasting the air. His guide wolf, Boreas, led him straight down the center aisle, its claws clicking a slow, funereal rhythm. He passed the front rows, he passed the midsection, he passed Darian and Callista without a flicker of acknowledgement, a snub so profound it was like a physical strike. He stopped, right in the middle of the hall, near the back rows where Elsinore sat frozen. She was still on her chair, the only person not kneeling, paralyzed by a combination of terror and her low Omega status. He can't see me. He can't see me. I am nothing. I am invisible. She tried to make herself small, to shrink into the lavender folds of the hated dress, her heart hammering a desperate rhythm against her ribs. The king stood motionless for a long, agonizing second. His head was tilted, scanning. He inhaled, a long, slow sound that seemed to draw all the warmth from the air. His dire wolf, Boreas, lifted its massive head. It sniffed the air, its black lips pulling back from its teeth. And then it let out a growl. It was not a warning, it was a deep, floor-rumbling sound of recognition, of possession. The great wolf's head and the king's scarred face snapped in unison. They turned away from the aisle, away from the cowering guests, and stared directly, precisely, at Elsinore. Chapter 3. The Whisper. The world contracted to a single, terrifying point. The king's gaze, though sightless, was heavier than any physical touch. It pinned Elsinore to her chair. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. The whispers had stopped, but she could feel the burning weight of every eye in the hall swiveling from the king to her. The pathetic Omega in the back row. Boreas, Theron murmured. His voice was a low gravel, a rumble that vibrated in Elsinore's bones. He placed a hand on his wolf's head, and the growl subsided, though the creature's massive chest still vibrated with it. Then the king moved. He didn't walk around the pews. He stepped between them, a movement of liquid power and absolute authority. Guests scrambled backward, falling over each other to clear a path. He moved not with the hesitation of a blind man, but with the unerring certainty of a heat-seeking missile. He was following the scent. He was following the growl. He was coming for her. No, 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 please not me. I've done nothing, her mind screamed. This was some terrible mistake. He was here to punish Darian for some transgression, surely. He was... He stopped directly in front of her chair. He was so tall he blocked the light from the doors. She was enveloped in his shadow, in his scent. It was overwhelming. Not just pine and ozone, but the sharp, clean smell of a winter storm, of ancient stones, and something metallic, like blood and power. It filled her lungs, choking her. She stared at the hard line of his jaw, the terrifying beauty of his scarred face. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. The hall held its breath. The silence was so total, Elsinore could hear the frantic, rabbit-fast thud of her own heart. He leaned down. He lowered his head until his face was inches from hers. His sightless eyes seemed to look through her, past her skin and bones, and into the hollow, aching void where her wolf used to be. He inhaled again, this time a short, sharp breath. A strange, soft sound, almost a sigh, escaped his lips. His expression was not angry. It was one of profound, world-shattering confusion. And then he spoke. His whisper was for her alone, but in the crushing silence it carried like a shout. "My wolf knows you!" The reaction was instantaneous. A collective, shattering gasp echoed from 100 throats. Someone in the front row fainted, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Callista shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury. "What is the meaning of this? Get away from my sister." Darian surged forward, his alpha rage finally overcoming his fear. "Your Majesty," he snarled, his voice tight. "This is my wedding day. That is just an Omega. She is nothing, a rejected. She is of no concern to you." King Theron did not flinch. He did not turn. He simply raised one hand to the side, a gesture of absolute finality. "Silence." Darian choked on his own rage, as if the word had been a physical blow. Theron's attention remained fixed on Elsinore. She was trembling so violently her teeth chattered, the sound clicking in the silence. What? What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice a reedy, terrified thing. I am Elsinore. I'm no one. You are no one," he agreed, his voice a soft rumble. "And yet my wolf, who has not spoken in a decade, is screaming your name." He straightened to his full, terrifying height. He turned his head in the general direction of the stunned hall. His voice was no longer a whisper. It was a command that rattled the crystal goblets. "The wedding is over." He turned back to Elsinore. He held out his hand. "Bring her to me." Before she could react, 2 guards, clad in the same shadow black leather as their king, materialized at her side. They did not grab her. They simply stood, flanking her, their presence an iron cage. The hall erupted into chaos. Chapter 4. The Claim. "You cannot." Callista's voice was a shrill blade, slicing through the panicked murmurs of the crowd. She stumbled down the aisle, her white dress dragging, her face a mask of furious disbelief. "You cannot just take her. She's ruined my wedding." Darian was at her side, his hand on her arm, but his eyes were fixed on Theron. His fear was now warring with his possessive alpha nature. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice strained. "She is a member of my pack. By pack law, she is under my protection. You have no right." King Theron turned his head slowly, his blind gaze finding Darian with pinpoint accuracy. A humorless smile touched his lips. "Your protection? The same protection you offered when you rejected her in the public square? The same protection you gave her by mating her sister in front of her?" The king's voice was soft, conversational, and it made the blood run cold. "Your laws do not apply here, little Alpha. The moon's law does." He turned back to Elsinore, his hand still extended. "You are my fated. The bond is roaring. I can feel it, and so can you." Elsinore's mind was a whirlwind of sheer, unadulterated panic. Fated? Him? This wasn't a rescue. This was a different kind of execution. This was a cosmic joke, a cruel twisting of the knife. "No," she stammered, shaking her head so hard her dark hair whipped across her face. "No, you're mistaken. It's not possible. I'm rejected. My wolf is silent. I have no bond. I can't feel anything." It was the truth. She felt his power, a crushing weight. She felt his scent, a disorienting storm. But the warm, golden pull of the mating bond? There was nothing. Only the cold, hollow void Darian had left behind. Theron's smile faded. His wolf Boreas stepped forward, its massive head now level with Elsinore's chest. It stared at her, its yellow eyes seeming to pierce her soul. "She's lying," Theron said, his voice flat. "I'm not," Elsinore cried, frustration and terror making her voice high. "I swear to you by the moon goddess I feel nothing." "This is a mistake." My wolf says you are lying, Theron repeated, his patience fraying. His hand dropped to his side. Your scent is a beacon in a fog. It's the scent of pine and moon silver. It's the scent of my home. You're lying to yourself, little Omega, but you will not lie to me. He nodded to his guards. Take her, gently. One of the guards, a man with a hard face and a long scar on his chin named Corvin, placed a light hand on Elsinore's arm. The touch was respectful, but as unyielding as iron. No, please, Elsinore cried, pulling back. I will not let you take her, Darian roared. He lunged, his alpha wolf taking over, his hands curling into claws. He was fast, a blur of rage aimed at the king. He didn't make it 2 steps. Theron didn't even move. His guard, Corvin, moved like a shadow. There was a sound of shifting leather, a sickening crack of bone on bone. Darian was on his knees, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle, his face pale with agony. Boreas stood over him, a low, deadly rumble issuing from its chest. You dare touch an alpha king? Corvin snarled, his voice quiet and deadly. You are lucky he let you keep your life, Silvermoon. Callista screamed. The entire hall was in chaos. Enough! Theron's voice cut through the noise. We are leaving. He turned and began to walk, Boreas at his side. He didn't look back. He knew she would follow. The guards lifted Elsinore to her feet. She was sobbing now, a dry, hiccuping sound of pure despair. She looked back one last time. Callista was weeping over Darian. The white roses were trampled. The wedding was in ruins. And she was being dragged away by a blind, mythical king, her sister's curses following her out of the hall. Chapter 5. The Journey. The carriage was black, lacquered obsidian that seemed to drink the moonlight. It was padded inside with rich black fur and dark leather, and it smelled of the king's storm and pine scent. It was a luxurious cage. Elsinore was alone in the carriage. The king rode horseback, flanked by his guards. She could hear the steady, powerful hoofbeats outside, a relentless rhythm pulling her further and further from the only home she had ever known. She huddled in the corner, her arms wrapped around her knees, the lavender dress still damp with spilled wine. This was madness, a waking nightmare. A king, a blind king, fated? The moon goddess had a sick sense of humor, to be rejected by the one man she thought she loved, only to be claimed by a stranger, a terrifying, scarred stranger who wielded power like a weapon. A man whose very presence had suffocated her, and he claimed she was his fated. She pressed her hand to her chest, to the hollow place. I feel nothing, she had told him. And it was true. There was no golden cord, no hum of recognition. She had felt a true bond once, the fragile, shimmering thread to Darian. She knew what it felt like, and she knew what it felt like to have it severed. The memory rose unbidden, sharp and visceral. The town square, the pointing fingers, Darian's cold, resolute face. Her wolf is stunted, her bloodline weak. The moment the words left his mouth, the bond had snapped. It had felt like a vital organ being ripped from her body. The world had gone gray, and the bright silver song of her own wolf had simply stopped, mid-note. Since that day, there had been only silence. An empty room in her soul. How could she be fated to an alpha king when she wasn't even a whole person? She was a broken thing, a rejected omega. The carriage wheels rumbled over the forest floor. Outside, the moonlit woods of her childhood blurred past. She saw the great oak where she and Darian had first kissed. She saw the riverbank where she and Callista used to sneak off to swim. It was all gone. She should be terrified. She was terrified. But underneath the panic, underneath the humiliation, a new, unfamiliar sensation was stirring. It was a tiny, faint warmth, deep in the void. It was like the flutter of a butterfly's wing in a vast, empty tomb. The king's scent, which permeated the carriage, was no longer choking her. It was unsettling. But it was also grounding. It smelled like the mountains. It smelled like safety. He smells like home. The thought came from nowhere, a whisper in her own mind that didn't feel like her own. Elsinore gasped, gripping her chest. No, she wouldn't. She would not be fooled again. She would not trade one cage for another, one alpha's whims for another's. This was a mistake, a political maneuver, a cruel game. She was a pawn. He smells of the mountain. He smells of our den. Who said that? She thought wildly, looking around the empty carriage. There was no answer, only the hollow echo in her soul. But the warmth, the tiny, insistent flutter remained. The carriage lurched, slowing its pace. Elsinore peered through the small window. The trees had thinned, revealing a stark, moon-washed landscape. They were climbing. And then she saw it. Two massive, jagged peaks rose against the night sky, and nestled between them a fortress. It wasn't a castle of pale stone like Silvermoon. It was a citadel of black volcanic glass and dark ancient timber, built seamlessly into the mountainside. Waterfalls cascaded from its ramparts, shimmering like liquid silver in the moonlight. This was the Obsidian Court. The carriage rumbled to a halt before gates of black iron, fashioned to look like sleeping dire wolves. The flutter in her chest pulsed, stronger now. Home. No, Elsinore whispered, her knuckles white as she gripped the seat. It is not. I will not be broken again. This is a mistake, and I will prove it. Chapter 6. The Palace of Shadows. The Obsidian Court was not dark. That was the first thing Elsinore noticed. The name was a lie. The entire fortress was built to catch the moonlight. The walls of black volcanic glass acted like mirrors, reflecting the silver light into every corner. The main hall was vast, open to the night air, with a roaring waterfall cascading down one wall into a crystal-clear pool. The air was cool, scented with pine and wet stone. Nobles, clad in rich, dark fabrics, velvets and furs in shades of midnight blue, deep forest green, and burgundy, stopped and stared as Corvin, the guard, led her through the hall. Their whispers were different from the ones at the wedding. They were not mocking. They were sharp, analytical, and cold. An Omega? Look at her. She smells of rejection. Is that what the king claimed? She's trembling. She has no power. Marius will not stand for this. Elsinore kept her eyes on the floor, her borrowed dress feeling like a beggar's rags in this place of impossible shadowy wealth. She was brought before the throne. It wasn't a throne of gold, but a massive, jagged chair carved from a single piece of obsidian, set before the thundering waterfall. King Theron sat there, Boreas at his feet. He had changed from his leathers into a simple, dark tunic. He looked less like a warrior and more like a god of the mountain. His head was tilted, as always, listening. Lord Marius, Theron said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast hall. His blind gaze was fixed on a tall, silver-haired noble standing near a pillar. The man was handsome, but his mouth was set in a thin, disapproving line. Lord Marius inclined his head. Your Majesty, you have returned with a guest. You disapprove, Theron stated. It wasn't a question. Your heart is racing. I can hear it from here. It sounds like a trapped bird. Marius's lip curled. Your Majesty, the court is confused. You left a simple pack wedding with her. She is an Omega, a rejected. She is unseemly. She has no wolf. She cannot be our Luna. And you are ambitious, Lord Marius, Theron replied, his voice dangerously soft. I can smell the deceit on you like soured wine. It burns my throat. Be silent. The entire court froze. Lord Marius's face went white, then red, but he bowed his head. As you command. Theron turned his attention to Elsinore. She stood trembling about 10 feet from him. They doubt, he said. As do you. You still believe I am mistaken. I am mistaken, Elsinore whispered, finding a sliver of courage. I am not who you think I am. I feel nothing. You feel the void? He corrected her. The hollow, the silence. You think it is your weakness. You are wrong. He motioned her forward. Come. She took a hesitant step. Boreas watched her, his yellow eyes unblinking. Theron reached into his tunic and pulled out a small, smooth, dark stone. My mother, the late queen, gave me this token when I was a boy. He held it out. It was lost to me in my 9th year. The day I lost my sight. It was lost in the Silvermoon Woods near the border. Where is its twin? Elsinore stared at the stone. How would I possibly know that? I was just a child. My mate would know, Theron said, his voice flat. My fated would know. My wolf knows. And he says, your wolf knows too. Look closer. She stepped forward, her heart hammering. She looked at the stone. It was just a rock. I don't know. A strange flickering image flashed behind her eyes. A memory that wasn't hers. A sun-dappled riverbank, a hollow log, the smell of damp earth. It's not a stone, Elsinore whispered, her own voice sounding foreign to her. Her eyes went wide. The stone you hold is a decoy, a false memory. The real token, It wasn't a stone. It was a piece of carved wood. A bird. A small hawk. Theron's mask of indifference did not break, but his hand tightened on the arm of his throne. Elsinore's voice grew stronger, the vision clearing. And its twin. You never lost it. You keep it. She looked at his feet. It's in your boot. A collective gasp swept the hall. Lord Marius looked as if he'd been struck. Theron remained perfectly still for a beat, then, slowly, he reached down. He pulled up the leg of his dark trousers. Tucked into a small sheath inside his leather boot was a small object. He pulled it out and held it up. It was a small, crudely carved wooden hawk. Elsinore swayed, her hand flying to her mouth. I don't know how I knew that. I don't know. Theron's face was a storm of emotions. For the first time, his control shattered. He looked for a split second, utterly undone. He stood from his throne, his voice a low, ragged growl that shook the very stones. She does not know, but her wolf does. Let the council be summoned. We will have the test. Chapter 7. The Test. The council chamber was a high, domed room, open to the stars. The only light came from the full moon overhead, and it cast long, accusing shadows on the faces of the dozen alphas and elders assembled. Lord Marius stood at the head, his face a mask of cold fury. A parlor trick, he hissed, his voice echoing in the chamber. She could have been fed the information. A simple spy, planted to win your favor. Theron stood by the chamber's entrance, his back to Elsinore. He was rigid, his power a coiled snake. Do you accuse your king of conspiracy, Marius? I accuse a desperate Omega of grasping for power, Marius shot back, emboldened by the support of the other council members. She has no wolf. We can all smell the rejection on her, the silence. A true Luna of the Obsidian Court must have a wolf strong enough to commune with the mountain. To accept the bond of the king, she is an empty vessel. Then we will see her filled, Theron said, his voice flat. He turned and his blind gaze found Elsinore where she stood, trembling in the center of the room. There is one way. Bring the moonstone. 2 guards rolled in a large waist-high pedestal. On it sat a stone. It was not like the black obsidian of the castle. It was a pale, milky white sphere, pulsating with a faint, cold light of its own. The moonstone, Marius proclaimed, his voice dripping with satisfaction. It echoes the soul of our pack's true Luna. Only one whose wolf is recognized by the goddess, one whose bloodline is pure and strong, can make it glow. He smirked at Elsinore. Go on, little Omega. Show us your power. This was a nightmare. This was the public rejection, all over again. I told you, Elsinore whispered, backing away. My wolf is gone. It's silent. Since the rejection, there's nothing there. He did not destroy it. Theron's voice cut across the room, softer now, for her alone. He walked toward her, his footsteps silent on the stone. He only silenced it. It is not gone. It is sleeping. Call to it, Elsinore. I can't, she cried, tears of frustration and shame welling in her eyes. It doesn't answer me. Stop listening for your wolf, Theron growled, stopping a foot from her. Listen for mine. My wolf knows you. Corvin, the guard, nudged her forward. Place your hand on the stone, my lady. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely control it. She reached out, her fingers icy cold. The moment her skin made contact with the moonstone, she gasped. It was not just cold. It was painfully cold, a draining, soul-sucking cold that seemed to pull the very marrow from her bones. She cried out, trying to snatch her hand back, but the stone held her fast. Nothing happened. The stone's faint, milky light remained unchanged. A titter of laughter went up from the council. Marius smiled, a slow, triumphant spreading of his lips. Just as I thought, a fraud. Elsinore's world collapsed. The shame was a physical weight, a cold oil seeping into her bones. He was right. She was nothing. A hollow shell. I am nothing. You are a liar, a voice snarled in her head. It was not her voice. It was deep, ancient, and full of rage. Before she could process it, Theron stepped forward. You are not nothing, he whispered, his voice a fierce counterpoint to the voice in her head. He covered her hand with his own, pressing it firmly against the ice-cold stone. The contact was a detonation. It was not a spark. It was a jolt of pure, unadulterated power. His warmth, his strength, his wolf flooded her. The hollow, empty void inside her suddenly had a shape. It was a vacuum, and his power rushed in to fill it. Elsinore screamed. The moonstone exploded with light. It was not the gentle white glow the council expected. It was a violent, blinding flash of silver-blue fire. It shot upward, a column of raw energy that lit the chamber like a lightning strike. The council members cried out, shielding their eyes. And around Elsinore, visible to all, her aura flared. It was not the pale, hesitant shimmer of an omega. It was a raging silver inferno, ancient and powerful, lashing out like a living thing. It dwarfed even Theron's own red-gold aura. The stone pulsed again, and the silver-blue light slammed back into her, throwing her backward. Theron caught her before she hit the floor. The chamber was plunged back into moonlight. The council was silent, their faces pale with shock and terror. Lord Marius stared, his mouth open, his triumphant smirk gone, replaced by a look of dawning, superstitious horror. Elsinore was panting in Theron's arms, the world spinning. The last thing she saw before she fainted was the king's scarred face, his expression not of triumph, but of profound, earth-shattering shock. Chapter 8. The Doubt. Elsinore awoke in a room that was not her own. It was a vast, circular chamber, its walls made of the same dark glass, but it was softened by thick furs on the floor and a fire crackling in a massive hearth. She was in a bed so large it could have held 5 of her. She was strained, her body aching as if she'd been struck by lightning. The memory of the silver-blue fire was seared into her mind. She was supposed to be weak. She was supposed to be an omega. What was that? Restless, she slipped from the bed, wrapping a fur throw around her thin shoulders. The borrowed lavender dress was gone, replaced by a simple, soft-spun wool nightgown. The castle was silent. She crept to the door and opened it. The corridors were lit by the moon, empty. She didn't know what she needed. Air, answers. She wandered, her bare feet silent on the cool stone. As she passed a partially open doorway, she heard voices, low, urgent, and angry. Unnatural, a flare of wild magic. It was his power, not hers, forced through the stone. It was Lord Marius. It was silver. Another voice, one she didn't recognize, argued. His aura is red gold. Hers was different. A trick, Marius snapped. A deception. He is blinded by this fated bond. He is compromised. If she is truly his mate, she is his weakness. And he has just given her a power she cannot control. What do you propose? The ritual of the blood moon is approaching. It is a time of sacrifice, a time when bonds are tested. It will be our chance. We will expose her as a fraud then, and sever this unnatural tie. For the good of the pack. Elsinore's blood ran cold. Sever the tie. They were plotting against her, against their king. She backed away, stumbling into a carved table. A vase wobbled. She froze. The voices stopped. Who's there? Marius's voice was sharp. She turned and ran. She fled down the hallway, her heart pounding, not knowing where she was going until she burst through a set of double doors and found herself on a high, wind-swept balcony. The mountain air was thin and cold. She gasped, clutching the railing. You're pale. What did you hear? Theron's voice came from the shadows. He was there, leaning against the balustrade. His face turned to the stars he couldn't see. Nothing. She lied. Your heart is a drum, Elsinore, and you smell of fear. He pushed off the wall and walked toward her. You heard Marius. You heard his plot. He thinks I'm a fake, she whispered, her throat tight. He thinks that power at the moonstone, it was yours, not mine. He's right, isn't he? She looked at him, desperate. I've never done that before. I've never felt anything like that. That was you. You forced it. It was ours. Theron corrected her, his voice tight with an emotion she couldn't place. It was your emptiness and my power, meeting in the stone. I did not know it would do that. He paced the balcony, his movements agitated, like a caged wolf. For the first time, he seemed vulnerable. You doubt, he stated, stopping in front of her. You feel my doubt too, don't you? It is part of the bond, my fear, my confusion. He reached up, his fingers tracing the silver scars over his eyes. You want to know how this happened? She nodded, unable to speak. It was a betrayal. He said, his voice dropping to a low, painful rasp. A sorceress from a rival pack. One I trusted. My father had killed her mate in a border skirmish. I did not know. I offered her sanctuary. He turned his face to the moon. She offered me a gift. A potion, she said, to see the truth of my court. To see the lies in men's hearts. I was young, arrogant. I drank it. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. And I saw the truth. For one agonizing moment, I saw the jealousy, the ambition, the hate. And then, the light was torn away. She had not given me a gift. She had used my own power to forge my curse. He turned his blind eyes to Elsinore. The prophecy she spat as she was dragged away. I've never forgotten it. You will see again, Alpha King, only when the moon's forgotten half finds you. Only when your true mate. He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the heat from his body, his voice a low, desperate whisper that sent a shiver down her spine. Only my true mate can break the curse, but the prophecy also said she would be the price. Chapter 9, The Touch. The price? Elsinore whispered, her voice lost in the mountain wind. What does that mean? I don't know. Theron's voice was ragged. He was closer than he had ever been, his control slipping, his aura a restless, heated thing that prickled her skin. And for 10 years, I prayed I would never find out. I accepted the darkness. I learned to rule from it. I learned to see in it. He gesticulated, his hand slicing through the air. I hear Marius's lies. I smell Callista's jealousy. I hear your heartbeat. God's your heartbeat. It's the only honest sound in the world. He was spiraling, lost in a decade of rage and isolation. And now, you, this bond, this pull? He clenched his fists. It's a chain, Elsinore, and I don't know if it's pulling me to salvation or to an execution. He turned, pacing violently. He didn't know the balcony. Boreas was not with him. He stumbled, his leg catching the edge of a misplaced stone brazier. He grunted, lurching off balance. Elsinore didn't think. Her body moved on pure instinct. She lunged forward, grabbing his arm to steady him. Theron! Her bare hand, warm from the fur, clamped down on his cold, bare forearm. The contact was an explosion. It wasn't a spark. It was a psychic detonation. A raw, uncontrolled surge of energy that arced between them. For Theron, the darkness behind his eyes, a solid, unchanging black for 10 years, suddenly shattered. It wasn't sight. It was light. A blinding, searing, agonizing white light that had no source. He roared, a sound of pure agony, as flashes of images, not his own, burned through his mind. A silver wolf, running through snow, a hollow tree by a riverbank. A little girl with wide, frightened, silver-gray eyes. Her eyes. For Elsinore, it was not light. It was sound. It was pain. The hollow void inside her was instantly flooded with his life. 10 years of perfect, silent darkness. The echo of the sorceress's laugh. The sharp, metallic scent of his mother's blood on the day she died. The crushing, suffocating loneliness of the throne. His rage, his discipline, his pain. It was too much. She screamed, a high, thin sound of a soul being overloaded. The bond, the chain he spoke of, flared violently between them. It was no longer a pull. It was a conduit, and the power was out of control. Theron staggered, clutching his head, his roar turning into a groan. His scarred eyes, always closed, flew open. The milky, silvered tissue of the scars pulsed. For one single, horrifying second, a brilliant blue-gold light glowed behind the scars, illuminating them from within. Both of them collapsed. Theron fell to his knees, his hand still locked on her arm, dragging her down with him. Guards, hearing the roar, burst onto the balcony, their swords drawn. Your Majesty, Corvin shouted, his face pale with alarm. Theron was on all fours, his head bowed, his entire body shaking from the shock. Boreas, his guide wolf, pushed past the guards, whining, nudging its massive head against Theron's shoulder, then against Elsinore's cheek, as if confused by their shared pain. Theron groaned, his voice slurred, his consciousness fading. He was not speaking as a king. He was not speaking as a man. His hand gripped Elsinore's, his thumb brushing her pulse. He was speaking as his wolf. His voice, a low, guttural, ancient sound, echoed on the cold stone. He was calling her by a name no one in that hall had heard spoken in 1,000 years. Lyra. My Lyra. Corvin froze, his sword halfway out of its sheath. Lyra, he whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief. By the goddess? That's the name of the first Luna. Act 4, The Revelation. Chapter 10, The Moon's Secret. They were rushed to the healer's wing, a quiet, warm part of the fortress that smelled of dried herbs and wood smoke. An ancient she-wolf, her fur more gray than brown, was waiting. This was Sabriel, the pack's seer and elder, her eyes holding the cloudy wisdom of a century. She attended to Elsinore first, forcing a warm, bitter tea between her lips. The shaking subsided. Then she turned to Theron. He was sitting on a cot, his head in his hands, his breathing still ragged from the shock. You called her Lyra, Sabriel said, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. It was not a question. It was my wolf, Theron managed, his voice strained. Boreas? He spoke, through me. Lyra, Sabriel murmured, her old eyes fixed on Elsinore, who was slowly sitting up. The first Luna, the mate of the first Alpha, the one who sacrificed her form, her humanity, to give us the bond. The one who became the wolf spirit, binding us all to the moon. The legends say she was the original Omega, the source of all pack bonds. Elsinore's head was spinning from the tea, from the shock, from the name. What? What are you talking about? My name is Elsinore. Sabriel ignored her, her gaze locked on the king. 1,000 years ago, Lyra's soul was given to the moon, but the prophecy always said she would return, that her soul would be reborn in a time of greatest need to balance the alphas when their power grew too great. The seer turned her ancient cloudy gaze on Elsinore. You are not an Omega child, you are a reincarnation. You carry the mark, the soul of the first Luna, Lyra. Elsinore just stared. That's impossible. I'm weak. I was rejected. That is the tragedy, Sabriel snapped, her voice suddenly fierce. You were born to your fated mate Darian, as the legends decreed. A new alpha, a new Lyra, a new balance. But his pride was too great. His spirit was too small. He rejected the moon. He rejected the balance. She began to pace, her robe sweeping the floor. He broke the chain. He unbalanced everything. And the goddess, she is not kind. She is just. When the balance was broken, she lashed out. She pointed a gnarled finger at Elsinore. Your weak wolf wasn't weak. It was dormant. It was the original power, the silver fire waiting for its true mate to awaken it. When Darian rejected you, he did not just silence your wolf. He shattered the vessel. He created the void. Then she turned to Theron, her expression softening into pity. And the goddess required a price for this imbalance. The most powerful alpha in the world, the king, would pay for the sin of a lesser. His blindness was not just a sorceress's revenge, it was a consequence, a cosmic punishment. When the chain was broken, the world's most powerful alpha was blinded, and the world's most powerful omega was silenced. Theron stood up, his body tense. What are you saying, Sabriel? The old seer looked between them, her eyes filled with a dawning, terrible understanding. I am saying your curse and her rejection are not two separate tragedies. They are two halves of one whole. Your souls, they are bound, not just as mates, but as two halves of one curse. She walked to the window and looked out at the sky. The moon was high and full, but a faint reddish-brown stain was beginning to creep across its edge. And the goddess is not finished. The blood moon is 3 nights away. The time for the ritual is at hand. The time to restore the balance, or sever it forever. Chapter 11. The blood moon approaches. The next 3 days were a blur of tension. The castle was preparing, but not for a celebration. A heavy, portentous energy hung in the air. Lord Marius and his followers were quiet, watching, their plot clearly on hold as they too waited to see what the blood moon would bring. Sabriel gathered Theron and Elsinore in the chamber of the moonstone. The stone itself was dark, its milky light extinguished, as if waiting. The prophecy of the blood moon is ancient, Sabriel explained, her voice low. It is the night of the great sacrifice. It is when the goddess rebalances her scales. To restore what was broken, the two halves must become one. The bond must be fully, willingly accepted. Elsinore's heart hammered. Accepted? We accept. It is not so simple. Sabriel's face was grim. The goddess is cruel. She demands a price for what Darian broke. A sacrifice must be made. One of you must give up your greatest gift to restore the other. Theron, who had been listening silently, tilted his head. My gift? Your power, Sabriel said. Your Alpha King status. Your Wolf Boreas. You can pour all of it into her, into the void. You can use your power to fully awaken Lyra's soul. She will become, as the first Luna was, a being of pure silver energy, a true goddess on earth. The balance will be restored. And what happens to me? Theron asked, his voice dangerously quiet. You will be just a man, wolfless, powerless, and the curse was tied to your alpha magic. Without it, the curse remains. You will be blind forever. Elsinore's stomach dropped. No, I won't accept that. She turned to Sabriel. What is my sacrifice? The old seer looked at her with profound sadness. You have your wolf, the soul of Lyra, the silver fire we all saw. It is the original power, the very source of the bond. You can give it all to him. You can pour your soul, your very essence into his darkness, and it will break the sorceress's curse. It will restore his sight. The balance will be restored. And I? Elsinore's voice was a whisper. You will be as you are now, but the void will be permanent. You will be just a human, wolfless, mateless in the true sense. The bond will be gone, forever. Later that night, the moon, now a deep rusty crimson, cast a bloody light over the balcony. The air was cold, the wind howling. Elsinore stood at the railing, her arms wrapped around herself. The choice was simple. It wasn't a choice at all. I will not let you do it. Theron's voice came from behind her. She turned. He stood in the doorway, his dark form silhouetted against the firelight. You have lived in darkness for 10 years, she said, her voice shaking but firm. I have lived in silence for only a few months. Your people need a king who can see. They need your strength. And I need you, he said, walking toward her. He stopped, his face inches from hers. For 10 years, Elsinore, no one has seen me. They see the king, they see the curse, they see the power. But you, when you touched me, you saw me. You saw the man. I am finally known. He reached out, his hand trembling and his fingers, calloused and warm, traced the line of her jaw, her cheekbone, her brow. He was memorizing her. Your heartbeat is my anchor in a sea of lies, he whispered. Your scent is my landscape. I know your soul. Your face is just a detail I do not need. I love you, she whispered, the words tearing from her, raw and true. The tears she'd refused to cry at the wedding finally came, hot and fast. I think my wolf has loved yours for 1,000 years. Then do not ask me to lose you, he pleaded. He leaned in and kissed her. It was not a fiery, passionate kiss. It was deep, desperate, and full of sorrow. It was a kiss of profound connection, a joining of two broken souls. It was a promise. He pulled back, his forehead resting against hers. I'd rather stay blind than lose you, Lyra. And I'd rather be silent than let you, she whispered back. His expression hardened. And I won't give you that choice. Before she could react, he grabbed her arm. He was impossibly fast. He dragged her from the balcony, back into her room. Corvin, he roared. The guard appeared instantly. Your Majesty? Lock her in, post 2 guards. Do not under any circumstances let her out. Theron, no, Elsinore screamed, beating against his chest. You can't, it's my choice. I am your king, he growled, his voice full of the Alpha's command. He pushed her past the threshold and slammed the heavy oak door. She heard the click of the iron bolt. She hammered on the door, sobbing. Theron, please, don't do this. She heard his voice, muffled but resolute from the other side. Protect her, Corvin. With your life. Yes, my king. His footsteps faded, heavy and fast, heading for the chamber of the Moonstone. He was going to sacrifice his power. He was going to choose to be blind forever. For her. Chapter 12. The Sacrifice. The chamber of the Moonstone was bathed in the sickly crimson light of the blood moon. The moon, at its apex, seemed to hang directly overhead, a bleeding eye in the sky. Theron stood before the dark, silent stone. He was alone, save for Boreas, who paced nervously, whining low in its throat. I am here, goddess, Theron said to the silence. I make the sacrifice. My power, my wolf, my alpha status. Take it. Take it all. But leave her. He placed his hand on the stone, ready to renounce his soul. A noble gesture, Your Majesty. Lord Marius stepped from the shadows, his silver hair turned pink in the red light. He was not alone. 10 guards, his own men, fanned out, blocking the exits. Marius, Theron snarled, his hand dropping from the stone. I should have known. A king blinded by an omega. It's poetic, Marius sneered. He held up a small, intricately carved silver dagger. But your sacrifice is unnecessary. You see, the prophecy can be altered. If neither of you makes the sacrifice, but the bond is severed during the apex. What have you done? Theron growled, Boreas now standing at his side, teeth bared. The sorceress who cursed you, she was my cousin. She told me of other, darker magics. If a true fated bond, one touched by the goddess like yours, is severed with cursed silver under the blood moon? Marius smiled. The power doesn't just vanish, it goes wild. It consumes the vessels. It will kill you both. A tragic accident. He looked at Theron's blind, scarred face. And I, as your closest living relative, am next in line to rule. A king who can see. Meanwhile, in her room, Elsinore was frantic, pounding on the oak door. Corvin, let me out. You don't understand. He's in danger. My orders are to protect you, my lady. Corvin's voice was strained, but firm. He's going to sacrifice himself, she screamed, her voice raw. And Marius is making his move. I know it. I can feel it. She stepped back from the door, her mind racing. He sees me. The whisper in her mind. Lyra's voice, her own. A new strength, cold and sharp, flooded her. It was not the chaotic fire from before. It was a calm, silver certainty. She stopped banging. She stood tall. She placed her palm flat on the door. Corvin, she said, and her voice was different. It was not the reedy wail of an omega. It was clear, resonant, and held an echo of ancient power. Lord Marius intends to kill your king. You are protecting a corpse. I am your Luna. By the goddess, I command you. Open this door. On the other side, Corvin's eyes went wide. He felt the command, not as an order, but as a truth in his very bones. His hand, shaking, moved to the bolt and threw it back. The door swung open. Elsinore stood there, her gray eyes seeming to glow with a faint silver light. She didn't look at him. She just ran. She burst into the chamber just as Marius was advancing on Theron, the silver dagger raised. Theron's guards were already dead, and Boreas was fighting 2 of Marius's men, its roars echoing. Theron? She screamed. Elsinore, run. Theron roared, dodging a lunge from Marius. He was blind, and Marius was fast. Ah, the little Omega, Marius laughed. Come to watch him die. How fitting. Elsinore ignored him. She looked at Theron, his face tight with desperation as he listened, trying to pinpoint his attacker. The moon was at its absolute peak. This was the moment. I love you, she said, her voice clear and strong. Get out of here, Theron bellowed. She ran, but not for the door. She ran past the fight, straight to the moonstone. No, Marius shrieked, realizing what she was doing. He lunged for her, but he was too late. Elsinore slammed both her hands onto the cold, dark stone. I am Elsinore, she shouted, her voice ringing with power. I am Lyra. I am the first Luna, and I make the sacrifice. Take it, take my wolf, take my soul, but save him. She screamed as the power was ripped from her. It was not a gentle release. It was a spiritual fire, a void opening and turning her inside out, pulling the very essence of Lyra from her. The moonstone exploded. A column of pure silver fire shot into the sky. No, Theron roared, his chains shattering as the feedback loop of power blasted outward. The silver light, the very soul of Lyra, didn't vanish. It bent. It arced through the air like a living lance and struck Theron directly in his scarred eyes. He roared, a sound of agony and disbelief, clutching his face. The blast of power threw Marius and his men back, slamming them into the far wall. The red light of the blood moon faded. The chamber was plunged into the soft, normal light of the full moon. Elsinore collapsed, her body limp, her eyes dull and unfocused. She was not breathing. Theron, shaking, lowered his hands from his face. He blinked. He blinked again. The milky, silvered scars were gone. His eyes, a clear, sharp, brilliant green, were wide. He looked at Corvin, at the dead guards, at the unconscious form of Marius. Then he looked at Elsinore's fallen body, and for the first time in 10 years, he saw. Chapter 13, The Sight He Saw. The world was a violent, overwhelming assault of information. Colors, hues, shades, shadows, the sharp edges of the stone, the dark, glistening red of his guard's blood on the floor, the pale, terrified face of Corvin. Theron stumbled, his hands flying to his eyes, a groan ripping from his chest. It was too much. The light. It hurt. For a decade, his world had been a perfect, manageable tapestry of sound, scent, and touch. He knew his world by the truth of heartbeats, the texture of lies, the temperature of fear. This was chaos. Your Majesty, Corvin whispered, taking a step. Your eyes. Theron waved him back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He forced his eyes open, forcing himself to see, to categorize, to control. Stone, blood, moon, man, and her. He crawled to her, his new sight swimming. He reached her side and looked down. He saw her face. He had known it, of course. He had traced it with his fingers, memorized it with his senses. He knew the soft curve of her cheek, the stubborn line of her jaw, the silk of her lashes. But to see it. She was pale as the moonstone, her dark hair fanned out on the cold floor like spilled ink. She was beautiful. Not in the radiant, obvious way of her sister, but in a way that ached. A beauty of strength and sorrow. And she was so still. Elsinore, he whispered. His voice sounded alien to him. He reached out, his hand shaking, and touched her cheek. It was cold. The image, the flash he'd seen on the balcony, returned. Not a flash, but a clear, perfect memory. A little girl, no older than 7, hiding in a hollow log by the Silver Moon River. She was crying, her face dirty. A young boy, himself, arrogant and proud in his visiting leathers, found her. He was 12, visiting the pack with his father. "Why are you crying?" he demanded. "My sister, she pushed me in the river. She said I was too ugly to be seen." The boy had snorted. "She sounds awful." He'd reached into his boot and pulled out the small carved hawk his mother had given him. "Keep this, it's good luck. It will keep the harpies away." He had never known her name, the little girl with the silver-gray eyes. "It was you," he whispered, his throat closing. He gathered her limp body into his arms. "You were the last good thing I saw. Before the darkness, before my mother died, before the betrayal." He held her tight, rocking her, his new, seeing eyes burning with tears. "And you are the first thing I see now." He pressed his face into her hair. It smelled of pine and of nothing. The silver fire scent was gone. She was human. "Wake up," he commanded. It was not a king's order. It was a man's plea. "Please wake up. You cannot do this. You saw me, Lyra. You saw me when no one else could. Don't leave me. Not now. Not when I can finally see you." He pressed his forehead to hers, and a single tear, the first he'd shed in a decade, fell from his cheek to hers. A faint, shuddering gasp. Her lashes fluttered, her eyes dull and unfocused, found his. "Theron," she whispered. Her voice was thin, a human voice. "I'm here." She blinked, her gaze hazy. "It's so dark. I can't feel you." She looked panicked. "The bond, it's gone." He tightened his grip, his heart breaking. "It's okay, I'm here." She lifted a weak hand, her fingers touching his cheek, right where the scars used to be. "Your eyes," she breathed. "They're green." "Yes," he choked out. "You did this? You saved me." "Good," she whispered, her eyes fluttering closed. "That's all that mattered." Chapter 14, The Choice. Days later, the great hall of the Obsidian Court was packed. The air was electric. Lord Marius and his co-conspirators were in chains at the front, his face a mask of bruised, sullen fury. The council was assembled, and at the head, on the obsidian throne, sat King Theron. His green eyes, sharp and clear, missed nothing. Beside the throne, in a smaller, fur-lined chair, sat Elsinore. She was weak, still recovering, but she was alive. She was dressed in a simple gown of deep blue, and she watched the proceedings with a quiet human gaze. The void inside her was no longer an aching, hollow wound. It was just quiet, a stillness. "The king can see," an elder shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "The curse is broken, the balance is restored." "Restored?" Marius spat from his knees. "At what cost? Look at her!" He pointed a chained hand at Elsinore. "She is human. She is a shell. She has no wolf. She has no power. She is not fit to be our Luna. The law is clear, Theron. She is an empty vessel. You are unbound. You must set her aside and choose a new, strong mate, one worthy of your new sight." The hall went utterly silent. The council members looked at each other, then at Elsinore. Marius was right. The law was clear. A human could not rule wolves. Theron stood. The movement was slow, deliberate. He looked at Marius, his green eyes as cold as a winter sea. Then he looked at Elsinore. She met his gaze, her own clear and steady. She expected this. She was ready. She had made her choice. She would not be his queen, but she had saved her king. It was enough. "This woman," Theron said, his voice ringing with a new, clear power that needed no aura to back it, "walked into a living nightmare in a borrowed dress. She was mocked, rejected, and humiliated by the man who should have cherished her." He began to walk, not toward Marius, but toward Elsinore. She was brought to a court that scorned her. She was tested, threatened, and cornered. Her very soul, the soul of our first Luna, was laid bare for all to judge. He stopped in front of her chair. "And in the end," he said, his voice dropping, "when faced with an impossible choice, she sacrificed that soul. She gave up her power, her wolf, her very essence. For me, for her king, for her pack." He turned to the council. "Lord Marius is correct. She is not fit to be a Luna with a strong wolf. She has proven she is the only one fit to be my queen." He turned back to Elsinore, and the entire court gasped as the Alpha King sank to one knee before her. He took her small, human hand in his. "I do not need a Luna with a strong wolf," he said, his voice for her alone. "I need a queen with a spine of steel, and here she is." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. Tears streamed down Elsinore's face. "But Theron," she whispered, her voice breaking. I can't hear your wolf anymore. I can't feel the bond." "You don't have to," he whispered back, his green eyes blazing with a love so fierce it was terrifying. He pressed her hand flat against his chest, against his heart. "You can feel this." She gasped. Beneath her palm, she felt his steady, powerful heartbeat. And beneath that, a faint, familiar rumble. A purr. "Boreas." She looked at him, shocked. I can feel him." Theron smiled. "He sees me," his wolf's voice whispered, "no longer in Theron's mind, but in hers. And I see you, little Luna. You are part of us now. Always." The bond hadn't been severed. Her sacrifice hadn't destroyed it. It had changed it. She had given up her wolf, and in return, he had shared his. Chapter 15. The New Moon. A year later, the obsidian court was unrecognizable. The shadows were still there, but they were no longer threatening. They were places of rest. Elsinore, as queen, had ordered the dark volcanic glass to be inlaid with veins of glittering silver, and the halls were filled with the green of living plants. She ruled at his side, not with the power of a wolf, but with the sharp, insightful wisdom of a human who had seen the very worst of her own kind and the very best. They stood on the high balcony, watching the thinnest sliver of a new moon rise over the peaks. "You're cheating," Theron said, rubbing his wrist. Elsinore held the practice staff, a grin on her face. He was teaching her to fight, human style, and she was a distressingly fast learner. "You're just slow, old man," she teased, tapping him on the chest. He caught the staff and pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. He was laughing, a sound that was no longer rare in the castle. "My sight," he murmured, his voice suddenly serious, nuzzling her hair. "It fades sometimes." She pulled back, her heart skipping. "What? The curse? Is it coming back?" "No," he said, his green eyes soft. He tapped his temple. "It only fades when I forget to feel the world, when I rely only on these." He kissed her eyelids. "I spent 10 years learning to see souls, Elsinore. I saw the truth. And then I saw your face. He kissed her, a long, slow kiss that still, after a year, made her feel weak. "Your face is my favorite sight," he whispered against her lips. "But your soul is my home." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched the new moon together. The quiet in her mind was no longer an emptiness, but a peace. And always, humming beneath it, was the warm, steady presence of Theron and the deep, contented rumble of Boreas. "We received a message from the Silver Moon Pack," she said quietly. "Alpha Darien sends tribute, again. He begs for an alliance. Callista has given him no heirs. Their pack is struggling, weak. He rejected the moon's greatest gift," Theron said, his voice flat. "He will live with the consequences." "I almost pity them," Elsinore murmured. "I don't." Theron turned her face to his green eyes blocking out the world. "All I see is you." He was born with sight, but cursed by betrayal. He ruled in darkness, trusting only the ancient voice of his wolf. He was the blind Alpha King, but the moon, in its infinite wisdom, had taught his wolf to know her long before his eyes ever could.